on questions about the future of work in particular. And if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of ask some people like, what is top of mind? So maybe I'll ask Ben. Ben, like, what is top of mind for you? You are an attorney. You are an executive coach. You have a kind of amazing job, which I don't know if you want to share with the group or not. I don't know what the confidentiality is on that. But if you want to, what's top of mind for you kind of in the work you're doing?
Well, my primary focus is in my role as a leadership coach for lawyers. And so when I talk to law firms and lawyers about leadership, right now, the future of work is what is top of mind. It's about creating teams and how do we build teams in a hybrid or remote environment, and how do we learn from this the most recent past that we've been through to make the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years better for everyone involved, so that the well-being is better, efficiency is better, client services is better, and ultimately the bottom line is better. But I think that there's a lot. I'm really anxious to read the book and see what you've drawn out of our recent experiences that we can apply in other contexts.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing, Ben. And when you're talking, I was remembering, I don't know how many people saw the video. It kind of at the peak of the pandemic, there was a viral video about the lawyer in court who the judge was on Zoom, the lawyer was on Zoom, and then one of the lawyers had a filter on his computer where he looked like a cat, and he was talking like a cat. Igor's nodding. He saw that too. That one where the lawyer's like, "Yeah, Your Honor, I'm not a cat." That was like one of my favorite videos of the pandemic. And so I'm thinking about lawyers. I think for lawyers, it's like a really interesting moment, right? Because it's the first time where there's this idea that you could do almost everything remotely, right? Like even litigation or trials, like, do they need to be in person? I don't know. Would the justice system speed up and be more efficient if it wasn't all in person? Right? Like, I think it's kind of blowing people's minds a little bit.
I think we've proven in a lot of different industries that we can do things remotely, and I think you're right. There are a lot of efficiencies to be gained by doing so. Not just the efficiencies in the process, but then also like the well-being impacts for everybody involved. The reduced stress for clients, the reduced stress for court personnel, the reduced stress for the attorneys. There's a lot of gains to be had.
Yeah. And for lawyers, lawyers make their trade typically in the written word. So in theory, lawyers should be well poised to communicate digitally. One of the things I researched for the book is on how we have had to shift away from verbal communication or body language communication to written. Everything's written, right? Like if you write an email, if you write a Slack, if you write, so much is written now, and many people actually aren't trained or don't know how to write, and it shows up, or they have real trouble with tone. So I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Igor, have you seen problems where people with like tone of writing, and tell us a little bit like what you've seen? Oh, you're muted.
I can speak a little bit from my experience because English is not my native language. And even though my English was not bad when I moved to the States 6 years ago, I really didn't realize how many flavors of English you have when you communicate in writing. I was lucky enough to join a co-working space, and I'm actually working out of a co-working space in Charlotte, North Carolina, Huga Co-working. I was lucky to find people and to grab them and ask them, like, how does that sound? And I had a friend, he said, Igor, you go Belarusian on people because I'm from Belarus, which was his saying I was too direct. I was like speaking with people I didn't know too well, too like frivolously, I would say. So I don't know if that kind of speaks to observations. This is my personal experience, but on the team I'm with, Kepler, we have people from different countries. And again, when English for a lot of them is not their native language. And sometimes in like dealing with clients, it creates certain tension, especially when new people come in and they start to express themselves in a way, especially in writing, when it just doesn't come across as intended and the issue gets escalated. But I wanted to follow up this to what I think Ben was talking about in terms of the future work. And the question I have is not that much about individual work, but work on the team. Recently, I listened to a book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I really loved it. And I'm curious how this future of work is affecting teams that often have to be distributed. And in my experience, we can be very effective online, like even the team that we have in Charlotte. But to solve like tougher, harder problems where some tough decisions need to be made, we have a completely different dynamic when we meet in person. And I'm just curious in terms of either a way to create the same experience, because there are people we cannot meet in person, to get to that level of like emotional connection without actually like being physical in the same room with a group.
You said so many good things there, Igor. I'll share a couple of things I learned in my research, and then maybe I'll kick it to Dr. Rachel, who's been working on this pretty hard in her team. So what I learned in my research, a couple things. With written communication, it really helps for the team to clarify up front how you're going to communicate. So being like really explicit about, here's when we're going to email, here's when we're going to Slack, here's when we're going to get on the call, here's when we're going to do this, and have an exercise as a team to actually like agree upon those things. That can be really helpful. And it can be as detailed as actually like, what emojis are we going to use to convey tone? Because that, the little smiley face with the tears coming out to different people, I don't really know what that means. Like that could mean different things. That could mean I'm laughing, I'm crying. So you actually sit down and say, we're going to use this emoji to mean this. I'm going to do a green check on Slack to mean I've seen it. And it would be a courtesy to everyone on the team if when you read a Slack message, you check it. And that way I can go and see who's read it. And if somebody hasn't read it, I can follow up with them. So one of the tools I'm developing for the book is pretty straightforward, but it's like a grid that you sit down with your team and you go through and you say, okay, when I want to do this, I'm going to do this emoji. When I want to do this, I'm going to email you. And you kind of actually do an exercise together. And it's kind of like you're creating your own little culture for your team. So that's one thing from the book. And then the second thing you said is that connectedness, I don't know if you use the word empathy. I would use the word empathy. That's a section in the book I've been researching a lot. And then I think you said the word trust, which is probably the biggest word of all for people working together remotely. So maybe I'll kick it to Dr. Rachel. Do you want to share some of your thinking and what you've been playing with and trying with your remote team?
Absolutely. And I'll just say, backing up, being from healthcare, I'm a cardiologist, so obviously urgent communications happen. So triaging and communication, tell the right person the right thing the right way, is kind of fundamental to physician training. I don't work with physicians in the company that I'm part of. I'm leading a group of folks who are trying to innovate in healthcare around the most vulnerable patients in Medicaid. So one of the things that I see is pattern making. What I think is true is email is a horrible communication tool, and really my team knows that, and I don't tend to use it. That's a real challenge if you're going to lead a remote team, right? So we have had a couple of different tries at this. We have Creative Communications Thursday, which means cameras off. Come up with some other way to communicate. We've encouraged people to find those electronic tools that aren't email to communicate, obviously, compliantly, et cetera. But I will tell you, we do a couple of things each year to kind of try a different way of problem solving. This year, we've implemented an old school sort of brainstorming session called a charrette, where we put people in a room and try to make them solve a problem quickly. And that can be a very virtual room, but it has boundaries about attention and time, and it's very high energy. But that's one of the things that working remotely tends to do, is you get a lot of low level, high volume work, right? So you're trying to bring up the energy and bring in the intensity that sometimes happens when people get ideas, flying about in a room. The other thing I did, this was actually a performance goal that I think was really helpful because everybody had been going Zoom up until the 59 and then starting the next meeting. And so at the beginning of the year, I said, we're never doing that again. We have to finish the meetings at 45 or 25. It's a 30-minute meeting. And you have to, and I told my leadership team, you have to tell everybody about this, but you can't write it down. So part of the challenge was communicating the new culture without sending out a blast email. And I think, again, just really like undoing another layer of comfort in communicating. And it doesn't always work. Let me be clear. We fail all the time. But I do think the intentionality piece is incredibly important because every time we just like, I'll see somebody with their camera on a Thursday and I'm like, do you need something? Like I always feel like a little bit of a police for that because it's the norm. It's what people kind of revert back to. And I'm already like too close. I'm backing up again. Like, I think it's really a great thing to challenge yourself to change and then change again and then change some more.
Those are all great, Rachel. And you can't really see, I'll give you a little sneak peek to my office here. You can't really see that, but over here, I have all my sticky wall and those stickies will end up in front of me on the camera. Like you said, Rachel, because practice, you have to keep practicing. So I'll put it, so my reminder for the day, if I'm trying to like sit back from the camera, I might put a sticky note up and say, sit back. And I just leave that up there for a week until I get a little bit more in the habit. So yeah, we're all practicing all the time. I put